This conduct is unacceptable. It is heartbreaking. It erodes the community trust necessary for effective policing, and it is an affront to the vast majority of officers who put their lives on the line every day to serve Louisville with honor.
Those comments coming 1 year ago, and the report was scathing from the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland as he came to Louisville to announce those findings that would dictate the police department's future. The Department of Justice finding a pattern and practice of police violating Louisvillians' constitutional rights, disproportionately those of black citizens. Now, 1 year later, we are asking the city about the progress that's been made and what's ahead. March 8, 2023, validated the concerns of so many in this community, embedded problems within metro government and police. So where does Louisville stand on that agreement with the DOJ? Our senior reporter, Isaiah Kim Martinez, and a senior photojournalist, Elizabeth Newton, have been conducting new interviews now 1 year later. It's interesting that even a year later, things have moved forward, Isaiah.
Sure, Doug. There's a lot to cover here. And to add to that, both the city and DOJ officials have kickstarted negotiations on a federal consent decree, meeting for the first time in person late last month. The consent decree is a settlement with the federal government where Louisville agrees to spend millions of dollars annually to fund reforms within Metro Police. These reforms can be changes in policy or added steps beat officers and supervisors need to take. And independent monitors will measure this progress, and ultimately a judge will decide whether the city is meeting a constitutional standard, one they can sustain on their own. But as we learned, this process doesn't get any easier from here.
A community of disparity, but here's like a manger.
Each week, Gospel Missionary Church in Louisville's West End becomes a haven.
Yes.
For people from all walks of life.
All right.
A place of trust.
The room where the family meets.
In a time where distrust is widespread.
It's not a meeting.
Bishop Dennis Lyons.
It's friends of the bishop.
He's led discussions here since the protests of 2020.
Because there's no hidden agenda here at the bishop's table.
Uniting the community, police, and at one point, attorneys with the U.S. Department of Justice.
The experiences that people have on a day-to-day basis with LMPD officers.
Fast forward to March 2024. It's been 1 year since the DOJ released its report revealing systemic problems within Louisville's police department, legitimizing what many in the city's black community say they already knew.
Right now, that is our ray of hope in the midst of this darkness.
From the bishop's table to the negotiating table sits LMPD.
It seems like everything was a long time ago and yesterday all at the same time.
Deputy Chief Paul Humphrey reflecting on the day the findings letter became public, understanding what that next step meant.
That we were transitioning from the investigation phase to being patient and waiting for them to produce their draft of a consent decree.
The city finally received that draft on February 20th, kickstarting in-person negotiations with DOJ officials.
We would like to get this done as quick as possible.
Mayor Craig Greenberg with a voice in that room.
Yeah, there's a regular schedule of meetings.
To finalize the list of reforms Metro Police will be federally required to make. In a perfect world, what does the consent decree look like to you?
Well, in the perfect world, the consent decree is clear with what its goals are. There's a clear exit strategy. Everyone understands what the implementation is going to cost.
But last summer, we learned from our trip to New Orleans that perfect world can be a pipe dream.
And it feels like this cloud hanging over you that we can't get anything right.
We reported on a city under a consent decree for more than 10 years. New Orleans leaders describing the agreement as a double-edged sword, on one hand resulting in a more honorable police department, but also an agency gutted by an officer shortage and persistently high levels of violence.
We cannot afford an agreement that inhibits officers' ability on the street to protect people. If there's anything in there that we need to make sure that we alter to ensure that we can do that, that's the point of the negotiations that we're trying to achieve. The dirty little secret about consent decrees is they don't do anything. The Department of Justice will not come in here and do a single thing in the city of Louisville. The people that work here for Louisville Metro Government and the Louisville Metro Police Department are the ones that are going to do the work. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that that document is written in a way that we can do our jobs properly and reinforces us doing our jobs properly.
The DOJ has ordered the city keep the consent decree draft confidential until finalized.
But where is the injured party? Where are we at that table?
It's raised concerns amongst community leaders like Lyons who were already denied a spot in these discussions. They're fearful their best interests won't be reflected.
Nervous.
How come?
Because we have the same people at the table that we don't trust.
What does being transparent look like in the months to come if you can't give many details on the negotiations itself?
Well, we'll see what the Department of Justice allows us to talk about, whether it's managing expectations on timing, or whether we are allowed to talk about certain things. We'll see what they permit us to do. Even if folks are not in the room where negotiations are happening, we continue to listen to what the community is saying about their expectations.
Mayor Greenberg also tells me they're asking if there's any federal funding available to help foot part of this bill. As to whether the feds even consider this, Doug, is unclear, but the mayor says he's hopeful.
Well, let's talk about the pushback, Isaiah, because people involved in these agreements of other cities have been very vocal, urging Louisville to push back. Don't agree to everything and to the list. It's about 40 items.
Sure.
So what has that pushback looked like elsewhere? Have they been successful?
To some degree, Doug, the Justice Department does what it wants to do, right? They've done this in many cities like New Orleans. They've done this before. I think a big part of what Louisville is hoping for, the mayor has talked about this, is that showing them, hey, like we're about to read, right? Here are some of the reforms that we've already made even before you guys came in. This proves that the city can sustain these changes, sustain these reforms. They're in essence hoping that that shows that maybe the list doesn't need to be quite as long as maybe some other cities.
So you mentioned those reforms. We want to remind people there have been substantial ones so far. Let's take a closer look at the measures the city has taken to help progress the department toward reform. Mayor Craig Greenberg made an announcement this year expanding the Metro Safe Deflection Program. The Crisis Call Diversion Program allows the 911 call center to triage callers and decide if social services is needed to help someone in crisis instead of an officer. In 2023 alone, Metro Safe diverted 1,800 calls to a non-police response, freeing up an already overloaded and short-staffed department. That service is now open to 10 in the morning, from 10 in the morning to 2 at night. Also newly developed and suggested by the DOJ, the Police Wellness Center. The facility provides first responders with mental health services, physical therapy, and even financial counseling. The Metro Police Foundation saying good policing starts with a mentally and physically healthy officer. And then finally here, the Office of the Inspector General has taken a more hands-on role. Inspector General Edward Harness worked last year to create community policing councils. His plan is for each of the 8 LMPD divisions to have a board of civilian members to review policing in their district. The goal is to give people a direct outlet to their police officers. That's where we stand, 1 year up to date.